Which airlines still have passenger Boeing 747s? When the first Boeing 747 entered service with Pan American World Airways on January 22, 1970, it revolutionized how people traveled. The aircraft found immediate success with both airlines and the flying public, who loved its spacious feel. At the time, the program cost was at $1 billion, which is approximately $7.61 billion today. For many, the first time on a plane was with the type due to the affordability and opportunity that came with it. With a partial double deck and a unique design, the jet is known as the Queen of the Skies. The first variant to ever fly was the 747-100. Pan Am ordered as many as 25 of the new groundbreaking quad-jet. The Clipper Young America carried 335 passengers and 20 crew members from New York's JFK to London Heathrow. The Dutch carrier KLM was the first to fly the second variant of the Queen, the 747-200. It took delivery of the jet in 1971, and it was even hijacked once over Iraq. Lufthansa became the first to operate the 747-200F, the freighter model. In 1976, Pan Am was once again the first to fly another variant, the 747SP, a shortened version of the jet. In 1980, Boeing announced a larger version of the plane, the Boeing 747-300, with Swiss Air being the first to fly it, which featured an upper deck twice as long as the original. While the new version increased passenger capacity, it failed to increase the aircraft's range or incorporate the latest technology. Boeing only ever made 81 units of the type, which would turn out to be the least popular of all the models of the Queen. At the time, Boeing 747s were also becoming more expensive to operate because of fuel costs and the need to have 3 crew in the cockpit. As orders began to slow for the aircraft manufacturer's largest passenger jet, Boeing started to look at ways that they could make the plane better. So, Boeing announced the 747-400 at the Farnborough Air Show in 1984, and Northwest Airlines became the launch customer after placing an order for 10 aircraft. Several months later, this was followed by Cathay Pacific, KLM, Lufthansa, Singapore Airlines, and British Airways, all betting big on the 400 series. The most recent variant, the Dash 8, had Lufthansa as its first operator for the commercial version and Cargo Lux for the freighter version. However, the aircraft is becoming rare nowadays, and most of these airlines have already discontinued the double-decker. Although still popular with cargo operators, the commercial version of the Boeing jet is still recovering from the pandemic. In 2020, after the lack of passengers due to the quarantine, most airlines decided to cut some of the wide bodies off their fleets. That was the case for Qantas, KLM, and British Airways. Sadly, after 52 years flying the skies, Boeing is set to deliver its final 747 to Atlas Air in October this year. Since its first appearance, more than 1,500 aircraft have been built in all variants, from the first Dash 100 to the latest Dash 8s. These days, most of the passenger 747s still flying are the 747-400 or the 747-8. Air China has a long history with the jumbo jet. The first of its kind the carrier operated was the 747-200M. These were passed along with the Civil Aviation Administration of China, or CAAC, which first took delivery of them in 1983. After flying for 10 to 13 years with Air China, these jets went to Air China Cargo, presumably after being converted to full dedicated freighters. Between 2007 and 2010, the units left the company and went on to fly with other operators. Today, Air China is listed as having 10 747s in its fleet. However, one of these, a 747-8, is a VIP configuration and thus not used in regular passenger service. The other 9 consist of 3 747-400s and 6 747-8s. According to data from chaviation.com, only the Boeing 747-8 in a VIP configuration is active. However, data from FlightRadar24.com shows that the other Boeing 747-8s are in occasional use, making trips primarily between Guangzhou and Beijing. Air China isn't one of the best bets if you're trying to guarantee a Boeing 747 flight. Charter carrier Atlas Air has a fleet of 7 Boeing 747-400s with a passenger configuration. Unfortunately for those seeking out the type, this airline is unlikely to be a realistic option for hopping onto the jumbo jet. Atlas Air is a cargo carrier, and its passenger 747s are only offered on a wet lease basis. Only one is currently listed as active, November 482 Mike Charlie, a 21-year-old former Virgin Atlantic jet undertaking transport flights for the US military. The carrier also announced earlier this year the purchase of the last 747s. The 4 aircraft will be delivered between May and October this year. One has already been delivered. ASIANA Airlines has a single passenger Boeing 747-400 in its fleet. Registered as Hotel Lima 7428, the aircraft is configured with 10 first-class seats, 24 in business, and 364 in economy. The plane has been in occasional use, last flying a rotation to Ho Chi Minh City on May 11th and 12th. On May 17th, the aircraft operated a ferry flight across to Taipei, where it has remained since. It's unclear if the jet will return from Taipei, so it seems like ASIANA Airlines isn't a good choice for those seeking to fly on the Boeing 747. Korean Air is one of the most iconic operators of the 747 and is known for being a rare operator of the passenger-carrying version of Boeing 747-8. However, this is far from the first variant of the US manufacturer's jumbo jet that the South Korean flag carrier has operated. As recently as 2020, the carrier still had the -400 variant in its fleet. Korean Air began flying the 747-400 as a replacement for older variants of the legendary Queen of the Skies and had a fleet of 27 units. It had previously flown examples of the -200 and -300 variants. The latter of these had been quickly overshadowed by the 747-400's increased range and 2-person glass cockpit. The first of Korean Air's 27 passenger-carrying examples of the -400 arrived at the airline in June 1989. Almost all of the South Korean flag carrier's remaining passenger -400s then came on board during the 1990s. The bulk of Korean Air's passenger-carrying 747-400s left the airline in the 2010s. Interestingly, multiple examples that left in the 2000s returned to the airline as converted freighters. Other destinations included Atlas Air, Kalita Air, and Max Air. Its final 2 747-400s eventually left the fleet in February and March 2020. It scrapped one of these aircraft, and the other joined US cargo carrier Kalita Air, leaving the -8 variant as the only passenger option. Being one of only 3 airlines to take delivery of the passenger 747-8, Korean Air has 10 of the models in its fleet, although one is operated for the South Korean government. These are configured with 6 seats in first, 48 in business, and 314 in economy. FlightRadar24.com shows that 5 aircraft are currently active, exclusively operating flights between Seoul ICN and Honolulu HNL. Lufthansa is the largest remaining Boeing 747 operator. Surprisingly, when many airlines retired their Boeing 747-400s, Lufthansa instead opted to bid farewell to the far newer Airbus A380. Today, the airline has 27 jumbo jets left in its fleet, consisting of 8 -400s and 19 -8s. Even more surprising is that all of these aircraft are in active service. In January this year, 1/5 of the carrier's operations with the 747 were using the older variant -400. Lufthansa remains a passenger's best bet for flying on a Boeing 747. While dozens of Boeing 747s have been retired in the last few years, Lufthansa's commitment to the 747-8 means that we'll likely see at least one primary carrier operating the Queen of the Skies for the foreseeable future. Over the years, due to sanctions, Iran has become known as a bit of an aircraft museum due to its aging fleet of aircraft not really used anywhere else in the world. Mahan Air is listed as having 2 Boeing 747-400s and 1 combi Boeing 747-300M. The latter had been grounded since 2015 after an incident that caused damage to two engines and the fuselage. The aircraft was operating a domestic flight from Mehrabad International Airport (THR) in Tehran to Bandar Abbas International Airport (BND), with 19 crew members and 422 passengers on board. Just after takeoff, engine number 3 failed, with loose parts damaging engine number 4 as well as the fuselage in the process. The pilots made an emergency landing back at THR a little under 40 minutes after departure, bringing the aircraft and everyone on board safely back down to Earth. Since then, the 747-300 remained grounded until April 2021. But this is not the only aircraft that returned to the fleet. In 2019, the carrier brought back a 747-400 that had been stored for 10 years. Only one of the Boeing 747-400s is currently active, according to flight data. Echo Papa Mike Echo Echo, a 32-year-old aircraft first delivered to United Airlines, flew to Istanbul recently. Nigeria's Max Air also offers the chance to fly on a passenger Boeing 747. The scheduled carrier has sent 2 of its 3 Boeing 747-400s to Penal Air Park in the United States for retirement, though one aircraft does remain active. Russian carrier Rossiya has 9 747-400s in its fleet. However, due to sanctions regarding the conflict in Ukraine, the entire fleet is currently grounded. Perhaps they will return to the skies one day, though while the war in Ukraine is ongoing, it doesn't seem as though Rossiya's jumbo jets will carry passengers. As honourable mentions, we have KLM, that, even though being one of the first operators for some of the 747 variants, is not operating it anymore. The Dutch carrier had a long history with the type, flying the Queen for 49 years. Another notable carrier was Qantas, which was once best known for its 747-400 fleet, but before those, the airline had operated almost every other variant. The carrier has also flown a 747 with 5 engines. As the world and the aviation industry take steps to slash their carbon emissions, the 4-engine giants have been falling out of favour. This was abundantly clear through sales of the last 747 variants. Just 3 passenger airlines took on the Boeing 747-8. Few sales and most of the airlines scrapping the aircraft out of their fleets is a clear sign of the end of an era. This decline started a few years ago between 2004 and 2021, when flights by passenger B747s had declined enormously. The type still had more round trips than the B777-300ER, around 3.8 million. However, in these 17 years, the passenger 747 had just 8% of all wide-body moments, reducing from 18.5% in 2004 to only 0.69% in pandemic-hit 2021. With nearly 3/4 of these 3.8 million flights, the B747-400 has been by far the most important variant, but as seen previously, most airlines have scrapped the type, which means that the Dash 8, the newer version, is now the most used. In 2019, the year before the Quadjet's exit speeded up quicker than expected, the 747 had almost 76,000 round-trip passenger flights, with 22 airlines flying it. This number dropped drastically to only 8 carriers in 2022. The decline of the 747 and other 4-engine aircraft, including the A340 and A380, was inevitable, even before extra motivation came from coronavirus. Wide-body twin-engine aircraft have many benefits beyond fewer engines, and not just in terms of fuel consumption. A good amount of an aircraft's acquisition cost comes from power plants. Twin aircraft are normally lighter than quads for around the same payload, with the lower weight meaning lower navigation charges, landing charges, fuel burn, and carbon charges. This brings important operating cost savings, important during recessions, other crises, and times of high fuel prices. Twins normally have performance advantages too. Boeing has announced the end of the 747 production, with only 5 aircraft left to deliver. 4 are going to Atlas Air and 1 to cargo giant UPS. All of those aircraft are freighters. Boeing developed the 747-8 as competition for the successful A380 program by Airbus. The plane makers sought an aircraft with a capacity approaching 500 passengers and considered many designs before beginning 747-8 production by 2008. The manufacturer forecasted demand of around 300 airframes for the Dash 8, but the plane has struggled to get orders. Only 48 passenger aircraft have been delivered, while 102 examples of the cargo version have. Despite major improvements in efficiency and range on the 747-400, there were other planes on the market turning heads. Long-range planes that could be operated at a lower cost, including the 777X, were much more enticing, and there'd been an overall decline in demand for planes with 400-plus capacity since the turn of the decade. Even with early interest from many airlines, including British Airways and Emirates, both eventually choosing the A380, orders were underwhelming, and Boeing eventually cut its production rate by 2013. The 8i passenger variant has been out of production for some time now, but demand for the freighter kept the production line running. Boeing eventually stopped producing the 8i in 2017 as there were no remaining orders, but continued with the freighter. Even with Boeing discontinuing the program this year, there's still some time until all of the passenger 747s will be completely out of service, leaving some opportunities if you hope to fly in the Queen of the Skies. What do you think about the decline of the 747? Let us know in the comments. Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles every week. If you're looking for the latest aviation news and insights, visit simpleflying.com.